All right, so this presentation is about UCLA single-use plastics policy, and I will go ahead and get started. So to give everyone some background on sort of why this policy was created, single-use plastics and plastics in general never actually fully break down. So instead of actually breaking down, what happens instead is they degrade into smaller and smaller pieces and end up as microplastics, but they never go away. So all of the plastic that has ever been produced on this planet still exists today, just in different forms. So with this in mind, we want to sort of take accountability for all of those plastics that have been generated. So UCLA itself generates a lot of plastic on a daily basis. And so just to illustrate how this issue actually touches UCLA itself, here are a few photos that Kiki has assembled of different waste audits that were conducted. So the photo on the left shows a student holding a bucket full of utensils from Powell Library, and that's just the amount of utensils and straws that were generated in Powell Library in one day. So we see a lot of plastics coming through our campus in general, just because of the wide scope of operations that's happening on a daily basis. And there's no sign of any of this plastic decreasing in production. So over time, production of plastics has only increased, and we expect that trend to continue. And the other issue with this is that these plastics aren't being recycled. So less than 20% of plastics are actually recycled. So this graph sort of shows over time the plastic recycling rate. And this recycling rate is only getting lower due to new restrictions from China, which limit the amount of recycling that can be sent to China, which is something that was happening a lot with recyclables earlier. So even the plastics that do get recycled, it's a pretty small percentage. And so recycling isn't going to be the option out of this plastic problem either. So with that in mind, we wanted to develop the single-use plastics policy. And I'm going to hand it over to Liz, who's going to share a little bit more about how this policy actually came to be.
Thanks so much, Erin. And as so many things in our campus community, take place, students were really central to how this policy took place. Back in 2019, a chapter of CalPIRG, the California Public Interest Research Group, really across the University of California system, started a grassroots campaign that involved 8 campuses, 12,000 petitions to then president of the system, Janet Napolitano. Senior administrators signed on, many student leaders signed on, and student government resolutions were agreed upon on many campuses. And go ahead, Erin, if you could click through some of the letters that were part of this. It was really an impressive organized campaign that sought to bring to shine a really bright light on all of the issues that were particularly involved with plastics getting into our oceans, the impact on wildlife, the impact on humans, the fact that we all have plastic chemical constituents in our bloodstream. Every facet of that made up a part of these messages that were sent across the UC system. Next slide, please. And so that accompanied a lot of energy around this issue globally. We have seen in many universities a similar dialogue, a similar policy effort. Corporations are signing on, notably IKEA, Unilever. I think the beginnings of this really got their start in Europe, but it is rapidly spreading to the United States. We've recently spoken to Taco Bell, and also McDonald's are planning to phase out single-use plastics, or in the process of doing pilots on the there are new pilots that involve reusables, where you might order some of your health and beauty and cleaning products through an organization called TerraCycle Loop, and all of those products will be delivered to you in reusable containers that you then return and have refilled. Those are all picking up. They kind of had a bit of a setback during the pandemic, but this is all happening. Nations, states, Notably, extended producer responsibility laws are being passed in an increasing number of states that put the financial burden of cleaning up plastics and accounting for those that are already in the waste stream on the corporations that are putting those plastics into consumers' hands. We have cities who have signed on, including many that are local, and also airports globally, including notably SFO and others that are local to UCLA. So out of all of this discussion and the clear direction globally, UCLA drafted a single-use plastic policy in response to the student campaign, and that policy was drafted, submitted for public comment in 2020, and then ultimately signed into policy in late 2020. The comment period was extensive. There were many, many people who weighed in. Most all of them were either positive or constructive, and changes were made to the policy to account for the feedback that was obtained. And one quick note on this policy, in fact, you know, the responsible department is sustainability, but just as all of us presenting to you today come from different administrative areas of the campus, all working together on sustainability, really the realization of these goals is up to each and every one of us. And we will tell you a lot more about how to do that a bit later in the presentation. So what does the policy say, and when does it say it? The single-use plastic policy timeline, one more slide, please, is focused on eliminating products that are single-use plastic over time. So the initial deadlines were earlier this year. They were actually initially last year, but were adjusted for the pandemic. January 1st was one of the big key dates where plastic bags, beverage bottles at indoor events of less than 100 people, foodware accessory items, the containers, lids, straws, should have all been phased out. October 1 was another key date to phase out at larger meetings and events. And then there are a number of deadlines that will come in the future. September 1, 2023 is a big one because that is the terminus of the Coca-Cola pouring rights agreement. And on a continuous basis, we'll see many of the third-party restaurants and others on campus as their contracts are renewed or re-signed or renegotiated. The plastic policy will become part of the new contracts in those cases. So you may see a slower adoption of this in some of the third-party restaurants that organizations such as the one I work with, ASUCLA, and am part of, will have. But any on-campus owned and operated portion of the campus food service community will be making this transition more quickly. And you know, all of us play a role, and we'll talk a bit more about how to comply with Danita.
So I'm sure all of you are now wondering, how do I comply with this policy? And it mostly pertains at the current moment to foodware items and beverage bottles. So the main thing is basically you just have to replace all single-use plastic foodware items, so cups, utensils, plates, containers, with either reusables or locally compostable fiber-based disposables at any event, meeting, fundraiser, food service facility, anywhere that uses UCLA funding or is on campus. Same thing goes for single-use beverage bottles. Any beverage bottles have to be replaced with either reusables or recyclable alternatives, which only really includes aluminum or glass. A lot of people have been asking us whether the boxed water is recyclable, and the truth is that it's not actually recyclable because it contains aluminum in it. So having aluminum with paper and then with bioplastic, you can't separate that. And so in the facility, they just end up tossing it in the landfill anyway. So that is not a preferable alternative. Anything with aluminum or glass is much better. Next. So reusables are the number one recommendation from us. Reusables reduce the amount of waste that goes to disposal facilities. It reduces pollution because these things aren't going in the trash or on the streets, and it reduces the consumption of our natural resources. So this is the best option for in most cases. And some ways that we recommend that you promote reusables is using kind of discount programs or any kinds of incentives. Like if you're selling coffee, you say bring a reusable cup and you'll take $1 off, things like that. Or the opposite, which is charging for using disposables, like charging for a paper bag. But there are many ways that we can switch to reusables that are much more preferable to plastics. Next. And I know a lot of people are thinking, well, what about COVID? Are reusables safe during COVID? And the answer is yes. They are just as safe as any disposable foodware container. The CDC states that the COVID virus has poor survivability on surfaces, so it's very, very unlikely that you would get COVID from any kind of food products or packaging. And UCLA does adhere to all the CDC procedures and the California code for washing and sanitizing. We do recommend that any employees who are handling food or soiled reusables wear, of course, the appropriate PPE, and that they disinfect reusable PPE between uses, but there should be no kind of safety issue with using reusables. Next. So the next option that is also good for food products is locally compostable. And we say locally compostable specifically because not all compostables are actually compostable in our facility. So our waste hauler is Athens Services, and they have a specific facility that they use, and they have a 90-day period where the compostable has to break down. Unfortunately, a lot of the products that are currently labeled as compostable don't actually break down in that 90-day period, so they are not considered locally compostable. The only ones that comply would be anything that's 100% fiber-based unbleached, so nothing that contains any kind of plastic, bioplastic, or wax coatings. A lot of times we'll see labels like 100% compostable, certified, eco-friendly, biodegradable. None of these words actually ensure that something is truly compostable. The real identifier is that it's 100% fiber-based, because bioplastics do not degrade in that 3-month period, and so Athens Services will no longer take them. Next. So here's an example of that. Bioplastics, or PLA plastics, they mean the same thing. As you can see, they do not break down even after 2 years in the ocean or on land, while paper degrades within a couple of months. So they might say that they're compostable, but bioplastics are not allowed on our campus under this policy. And so Kiki will now talk to you about how to sort your compost.
Awesome, thank you, Danita. So we also get this question a lot because compost may be new to you, especially if it's not available in your city, hometown, or region. So at UCLA, we do take all food items, including meat, bones, shell, and dairy into the compost, as well as any sort of 100% fiber-based paper products. So that does include greasy napkins, paper plates, paper bags, and yes, moldy food can be put inside of your paper packaging if you left it in your fridge for a little too long and it needs to go. That is all safe to put into the compost bin, as this is an industrial composting facility. So for those of you who have backyard composting, this may be new to you, because when you have backyard composting, you're instructed not to put dairy, not to put meat, or anything that would attract pests or vermins. But here, again, they are being processed at an industrial facility. So all food items and all paper products can be put into the compost. Anything that came from an organic material or something that was alive, so green waste, so if you have flowers, those can also go into compost as well. Next slide, please. And just to reiterate, things that do not belong in the compost, anything that tries to market itself as biodegradable or eco-friendly, it doesn't really mean anything. It's not regulated by any sort of certification or any sort of mandates by authority. So essentially it is just greenwashing. They're just trying to market it to you to make it seem like it's environmentally friendly, but in reality, there's no detail that we can verify. There may be no truth to it. It just marketed itself as green to make you feel good that you may be buying something that's environmentally friendly. So bioplastics and compostable plastics, you may see them labeled as number 7 PLA, which stands for polylactic acid. If you see that recycling symbol, it also doesn't guarantee that it is either recyclable or compostable. So please be sure to keep an eye out for those, especially number 7 category is a catch-all other category. But bioplastics in this case are no-go. So if you see anything of like that to matter, please toss it out to the landfill. You may also see things marketed as plant starch materials made from corn starch, potato starch, some fusion of a starch. When you see this also doesn't mean anything. In fact, it's actually fused with some sort of plastic. So it still acts and behaves like a piece of plastic, and it falls under the bioplastic category. So those are also no-go. And of course, anything that is a recyclable or landfill material, do not put in your compost. Put them in either the recycling bin or the landfill bin. Next. Another question we have is, what is the cost implication of this? Is it going to be breaking our budget? What can we do? So we actually did some research, and when comparing the price per unit for fiber-based versus their alternatives, looking at a major distributor such as a retail store or Amazon, the cost is actually lower across the board. So if you're actually using PLA right now, it's actually much cheaper to look for something that is a fiber compostable item. So we do have a lot of items that are commonly used around campus, just put out there for your research purposes, just to show that they exist and they're cheaper, which is great for our budget and great for the environment. Next slide, please. So also looking at fiber-based versus their plastic alternatives, there is a slight increased direct cost, but when you look at the greater picture, the environmental impact, the social impact of everything that is petroleum-based, aka plastic, does have a lot of impact on us in the environment as pollution, as you're producing them and processing oil. So there is a little bit of that, but at the end of the day, it is still reasonable to purchase fiber-based in general. So according to the plastic waste report from the Los Angeles County, state taxpayers pay close to $420 million each year for beach cleanups and prevention efforts across all waste categories. And at the very top, plastic items are routinely identified as the most commonly littered item in our coast. So some things to consider when you're looking at the larger picture. Next. We do have resources. We're not going to leave you in the dark after giving you all this information about plastic. So please do check out our website, the single-use plastics policy, on our sustain.ucla.edu webpage. Somebody, please, if you could throw that into the chat right now as we're talking. We have a implementation guide for you. It may look a little daunting because it's a lengthy document, but it is broken up, as you can see on the screen. On the left side, there are table of contents, and you can jump directly to the section that pertains to you. So for example, if you're an event organizer, we have a section for you that will discuss everything about the single-use plastics policy and how to comply, resources for you, such as an alternatives matrix, which I'll talk about later, the UCLA coffee services in which you can purchase supplies in large quantities directly from our wholesale retailer. So very good prices there. If you're a department just trying to run a meeting or an event, there's a section for you. So please take a look at this guide. It will probably answer most of the questions that you have, but we're also welcome to meet with you and discuss if you have further questions. So next slide, please. The plastic alternatives matrix that I mentioned earlier is inside that implementation guide and just shows you kind of a matrix of what is not permissible, what is preferred, so like things like the reusables, and what's acceptable. So examples of the 100% fiber-based products, as well as any sort of notes that you may want to consider. Next slide. There are exceptions and other ways to comply. So if you just cannot find a reasonable alternative, if the vendors or the caterers that you work with just don't have a viable alternative, you can request an exemption form. We do work with you to try to find solutions as much as possible. And we also understand that there is one product that we cannot find right now, that is the paper cups with a little bit of PLA plastic lining. So our waste hauler did say that it is acceptable for our compost facilities to process just this particular item, but we will be looking for alternatives as much as we can until they exist. Another thing for consideration is that if you have existing stock, so if you have leftover materials from years past, please feel free to use those first. Once you use up that stock, you can look for all of the compostable alternatives and as well as reusables. And last thing that we want to know is that if you see plastic items across campus, please let us know. We really want to help these folks to be aware about this policy, give them the resources to be successful. Nobody is penalized. We just really want to do the outreach and education with them and work with them and whoever they be working in terms of vendors or caterers. So that form is also available and it can be completely anonymous unless you want to give us your information so that we can continue working with you. Next slide. That being said, thank you for listening to us talk about the single-use plastics policy. Our contact information is on the screen right now, but you're welcome to hang out with us, ask us any questions. We will monitor the chat. And thank you again for taking the time out of your day to learn more about sustainability at UCLA. And thank you, Staff Assembly, for hosting us and allowing the space to chat about this.
Thank you to all of you. That was great information. We do have one comment in the chat or question in the chat. Is it possible to get links for ASUCLA catering links as well?
Liz, do you want to take this one?
Sure, yeah. We are including all the links to every organization on campus, including ASUCLA, including the UCLA store, where a compostable policy compliant container is being used. So definitely working on that. And we would like to get more information as we go to get more specifics. So that can be a part of our presentations across campus.
Thank you, Liz. Are there any other questions for our panel?
Can we ask them orally?
Yes.
Yes, okay. My question is, if we are doing an event and using an outside vendor, is on the website or somewhere, is there a like maybe one-page description of the policy that we would give them, like, you know, to share with them?
Go ahead, Erin.
Yes, there is. So we have created a one-page letter to vendors. So I assume someone can pull that up and link it in the chat, but we have a one-pager that's a letter specifically for vendors that explains the policy and explains how to comply with it.
I put a link to that specific document, but if you go into the implementation guide, which is on the website that I linked earlier, at the very bottom, there's a section called resources, and it has a ton of links to all things such as there's a letter to clients, a letter to vendors, there's a presentation, there's the website, there's also a nice colorful flyer, all kinds of things that you can browse through to inform others.
Thank you. There's one other question. Are there efforts being made to educate students on sustainability?
Yes. So there are wide-ranging efforts to educate students on sustainability. In terms of this plastics policy, we are trying to get this information out to their sole advisors. We are currently compiling some resources and handy-dandy guides for them so that they can see it at a glance. Not only are we providing the information to their sole advisors, but we are working with the sustainability organizations on campus, as well as the undergraduate student council, USAC, to implement this language into all their funding sources and to provide workshops and educational series to help them get on board and understand what we're doing in the large picture.
And in terms of general sustainability for students, sustainability has been added as a topic in orientation. So all incoming students receive a short presentation on sustainability in their orientation. And all of our RAs have been trained in sustainability as well. So when students are residents, first years living on campus, they will also receive information from their RAs in terms of sustainability in general.
But if you have access to students and you know that they're interested in sustainability, we would be happy to work with you and your team. So if there's ever an opportunity, we would love to work with you.
Thank you. Another question, it says, under resources page, is there a copy of a flyer we can post in our office space that advertises, explains a bit about this?
Yep, I just linked it in the chat. There's a nice flyer that talks about the locations that must comply with the policy, has a link to our website, and has a link to the form where you can report any single-use plastics that you see.
Thank you.
Opportunities for staff to get involved. We do work with the staff. We have a sustainability liaisons program, which is basically a liaison is identified across every department across campus, and they actually meet with us on a monthly basis, and we talk to them about this different policies, resources, sustainability things going on campus. So if you email us, we can, and tell us what department you're from, we can connect you to your liaison and you could work with them on initiatives across your department.
Liz, there's a question specifically about UCLA catering. Do they offer China service, meaning metal utensils, ceramic plates, etc.? Is it very expensive?
Yes, it is. I do believe that is offered. And in terms of cost, I don't have information about the specifics there, but it should be something that is not tremendously more expensive than disposables.
And I just want to add to that is that if you do have a preferred caterer, especially ones that provides ethnic cuisines, things that we cannot be, don't have available on our campus, we want to work with them too. We don't want to make them feel excluded. We have resources to let them be aware about the single-use plastics policy. But on the flip side, you can also ask that they not provide utensils or any sort of foodware accessory items that are made of plastic. And then on the your end, the department can purchase some of the compostable alternatives and kind of meet them in the middle. So that is an option, and then the exemption form as well. So if those are some considerations for you, because we all know we have a favorite type of food that may not be found on our main campus.
Okay, next question is between remote, hybrid, and coming back to campus, what do you feel are the challenges and opportunities to implement sustainability programs throughout the next year or two?
I think one of the great opportunities about it is just sustainability in general is paperless. A lot of people have gone paperless over COVID because they couldn't be on campus, couldn't print things, and everything was virtual. So we are actually currently working with a lot of campus leaders to make the we're running a pilot across some of the departments to go fully paperless and analyze what are the benefits of that. But obviously one of the issues is that a lot of people are at home and the other half are on campus. And so there's, I guess, a bit more of a disconnect in reaching everybody. But we are, like with the single-use plastics policy, that's a great opportunity for those that are on campus to practice more sustainability by not using plastics or by using reusables and planning events in a more green way. So we're kind of working through all of the challenges as we speak.
Thank you for that answer. It's really interesting.
Thank you. Another comment, students are great. It's faculty and staff that are harder to sell, in my opinion. Is there a marketing campaign where the university may suggest types of products for faculty and staff to consider for their on-campus locations, off-site locations, and personal gatherings? People are not going to seek this type of information, as noted by the person who asked about a flyer to post.
I am working with our central procurement and just our purchasing team in general to create guides for Office Depot and for Brew and Buy that provide specific products that you could just automatically go to buy that do comply with the policy, so that you don't have to go search for them yourself. But if you have any recommendations on how to do that better, that's still in the works. So I would love some advice on that as well, if there's anything specific that you're looking for.
Another one is eateries on campus have been willing to take reusable drink containers, but it is not as easy to use reusable food containers due to health regulations. Any sense that this might change anytime soon?
So we're working with our environmental health and safety department closely in regards to getting reusables on board. So because the recommendations from the LA County Public Health changes day to day due to the pandemic, at this time we don't have a timeline, but we will announce it once we get the green light.
And just adding that in general, the state of California is been trying to pass legislation to make it easier to do this sort of reusable food containers and make that easier across the board to implement this. So there are challenges, but there's a lot of effort being made to make this a reality.
Yeah, one thing I'll say is that this is definitely going to be a transition, and we're aware of that. It's not going to happen overnight. We don't expect everybody to just completely change their habits the next day. So we understand that it'll be a transition. The most important thing for us right now is just educating people about it, just telling them that it's a thing, why it's a thing, and why it's really important. And then we'll see kind of change slowly after that.
How about a mass email? How about a mass email did you know campaign that periodically lets all UCLA students, staff, and faculty that true sustainability products exist? Maybe something like search the internet for plant-based food packaging or something like that.
So I know Danita's been hard at work in adding a section to the staff assembly newsletter. You want to talk about that?
Yes, so I actually am on staff assembly and I help out with the newsletter. So we have recently this year added a section at the bottom called Today's Tips, and that regularly provides sustainability education and tips on resources that we have available. That's one way that we've been trying to reach out to people. I believe that there was a Bruin post about the single-use plastics policy early on. But I mean, it's just difficult to I don't know how to access every single person's email. So it's not like I can just send an email to everybody, but we've definitely started reaching out, like I said, through our sustainability liaisons in the staff section, through SOL for the students, all different organizations, event organizers. We're definitely reaching out as much as we can. And so this is a great guide for that as well. This presentation will actually be on the staff assembly YouTube, so anybody can go back and watch it if they couldn't attend today.
And I think if we continue hearing that something like a Bruin post would be a helpful tool for many folks, that could help us make the case for why something like that should be sent out, as it's hard to get things sent out to everyone, but if we have a lot of support for why this information is important, that can help spread the word as well.
And Kiki just posted in the chat, we actually do have also a sustainability newsletter, which I also run. And that it's sent out once a month, and it just includes events, resources, information, open positions, things like that related to sustainability across campus, if you're interested in subscribing to that as well.
And since you're here, I'm going to do a shameless plug for our social media, which also provides plenty of wonderful information across the campus and beyond. So if you ever want to learn more about what we do and what's happening around the world, give us a follow.
Great.
Kiki, if you can post the subscription, or it's the link that's sustain.ucla.edu/subscribe. That's where you subscribe to the newsletter.
Oh, and ASUCLA has space in their newsletter for sustainability tips as well. So great. We're definitely spreading the message. It says, what about the chancellor's office connecting your office to the email list? Staff assembly is great too, but narrow for the entire UCLA community. We hear about 5Ks all the time. Sustainability is just as important.
That's a good point. Maybe we'll try that. I haven't thought about that, but we can reach out.
We do have Narit on the call, so I don't know if she has an answer to this question. Hi, Narit. Can you hear us?
Hi, I can. What was the question?
So the question was, what about the chancellor's office connecting to our office to the email list? Staff assembly is great, but too narrow for the entire UCLA community. We hear about 5Ks all the time, but sustainability is just as important.
Yeah, I think you will hopefully get more Bruin posts related to sustainability this year. We actually have a sustainability master plan that has been underway for over a year now with lots of input from staff, faculty, and students, but we'll be releasing a public draft of that plan. And both for the draft and then also when the plan is launched, I think you'll see a significant uptick in campus-wide communications around sustainability. But I will definitely bring this feedback to our executive committee that staff would like to see more Bruin posts. And as Erin mentioned, hearing that from you helps make the case. And yeah, Stratcom and the Chancellor's Office are definitely supportive of key messages getting out. So I really appreciate the support on that.
And for everyone who doesn't know, Narit is our Chief Sustainability Officer for the entire campus.
Thank you. Yes, nice to meet you all virtually. I see some faces or names that I know, and amazing presentation team. Enjoyed the Learn at Lunch. Thank you.
Leanne, did you have a question?
I did. I started voraciously typing and then I was just gonna say, first of all, I really appreciate this and the efforts you're making. It's really important. And I was gonna suggest something I subscribe to is a daily move mail that's sponsored by the Wooden Center. I think it's the Wooden Center, the Fit Center, but basically, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's sponsored by their programs there for staff where you subscribe to this email and you get a daily move mail. It's very quick. It triggers you to get up and do a quick little 2-minute exercise. And it's a nice little ping during the day. And I would totally subscribe to an email from your team with a tip of the day. And it's really simple. Like I follow on Instagram, Zero Waste Guide, and they offer these wonderful, quick little tips that just for sustainability that are very visually appealing and just quick and dirty, quick and easy. And I don't know if folks would get on board with that. I'm kind of a nerd about it, but I would hope that people would, and maybe that's a way to get it out, to offer something like that. Just a thought.
Thank you for sharing that, Leah. We'll definitely see what we can do about that.
Yeah, it looks like we got a lot of folks in the chat who like that idea. So we can bring this back to our team and see if that's something that we can put together.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I got a question from somebody. How do the panelists personally stay inspired to do this work when coming up against political resistance locally and statewide, nationally and globally? And are there days this work feels like rearranging chairs on the deck of the Titanic? It's funny. Anyone else want to start?
I can start. Oh, go ahead, Liz. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, this is very similar for me as many of the efforts to make sure that the products that we license are made in facilities that are not sweatshops. We plug away all the time and stay focused on our goal. Not everyone is going to be won over by what we're asking for or what students are asking for easily or quickly. But this is the way that the world is going. We're doing this for the right reasons. And you really have to have that North Star and you aim for it and follow it. And it all falls into place. So, you cannot let yourself be sucked into the negativity by folks who are not supportive. We're doing this for the right reasons.
And I'll add on to Liz, it is a great question because it ebbs and flows. A lot of us in the industry can feel that pressure and that tension and sometimes even burnout. So it's important to acknowledge that not every day is a smooth day, but having a support group like this team here really makes a difference, and having folks like you all being part of that movement, not just staff, faculty, but students as well, really gets us going. So having a North Star, having a good support group, but also acknowledging the bad days that you have and being able to take care of yourself and acknowledge that burnout if you even have it, which sometimes you do, and just picking yourself up and going right back into it. You're not alone in this, but once you see the results, you do really feel that sense of accomplishment and you keep going.
I'll say I've actually been involved in sustainability at UCLA since I was a student back in like 2014. It's been a long time. And I came back to UCLA to work on sustainability as staff. So part of it is that I'm just kind of used to it. I've just been involved in it for so long that you kind of learn to just take what you can and take the wins that you get. But something that I've been saying since I was a student is that people like to think that environmentalists are like big pessimists, that they're just always talking about what's wrong with the world. But in reality, we're the biggest optimists because we see what's wrong with the world and we see the issues, and yet we still constantly think that we can change and we can do better. So I think there's just a general sense of optimism that we always have that things can be better. And like Kiki said, a lot of that comes from talking to people about it and seeing the support that you guys are all giving us right now. Sometimes we go into meetings and people are not supportive, and it really kind of brings us down. But to come onto this and to hear everybody say that this is great news, that they want to post it in their office, that they want to tell people about it, that they want daily tips, that really gets us going every time.
Yeah, I just echo everything everyone else has said. So same page.
Well, thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat, but if anyone wants to ask any other questions to our panel.
While people are thinking, I'll just add to that last answer about how do you keep going. For me, everything that's been said is true about having the team and having support, but I'll just add it's also the students. Like, I think working at UCLA, seeing that the youngest generation cares so deeply about this and is so passionate and motivated and creative really helps me every day keep hopeful for the future.
Great. Thanks, Nurit.
Yeah, I was one of those students annoying Nurit.
Danita takes all the credit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're so glad to have you on the team now.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, Scott. Scott has a question.
Yeah, it's not a question, but I just wanted to say one of the things I've thought about during the COVID times is that change happens really slowly sometimes, but also change can happen really fast. So, look at where we're at 18 months after starting a remote work environment. So sustainability is it's a long road, but there's progress being made. So I'm happy for these short-term, fixes and moving us in the right direction over the long term. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for that
Scott.
comment. And thank you to our panelists. This is great information. And as you can see on the chat, there's a lot of support out there with, for you guys. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you to everyone for joining our session today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.